The morning Martha Calloway found her chicken coop empty of eggs but full of broken shells, she knew someone had been sending her a message, and by noon the whole town of Redemption Springs, Texas would be whispering that she had entertained a man in her home the night before. She stood in the dusty yard of her late father's homestead, her calico dress already clinging to her back in the August heat of 1882, and felt the weight of living alone as a 22-year-old woman in a town that measured virtue by the inch. Her father had died 6 months earlier from pneumonia, leaving her this patch of land 3 miles outside of town, and a reputation she had guarded as carefully as the gold watch he had given her mother. But Constance Pruitt, her nearest neighbor living half a mile down the road, had decided that a young unmarried woman with no family was either a threat or a target, and Martha was learning she had become both. The rumors started small, as poison often does. A comment at the general store about how Martha rode into town without a bonnet, letting the sun touch her face like a woman who had already lost her modesty. A whispered observation at the church socials that Martha had smiled too warmly at the banker's son, as if a simple kindness meant she was angling for a proposal or offering something far less honorable. Constance Pruitt had a tongue sharp enough to gut a fish and a mind that worked like a steel trap, always looking for the weakness in others that might deflect attention from her own failings. Her husband had left her 2 years ago, running off with a saloon girl from San Antonio, and Constance had transformed her humiliation into a weapon she wielded against any woman she perceived as prettier, younger, or more content than herself. Martha tried to ignore the stares when she walked down Main Street, tried to hold her head high when conversation stopped abruptly at her approach. She had done nothing wrong, had lived as purely as any woman could, tending her garden and her chickens, reading her father's books by lamplight, and keeping to herself except for Sunday services and her monthly trips to town for supplies. But innocence, she was learning, mattered less than perception, and Constance had spent weeks carefully building a narrative that painted Martha as a woman of loose morals who entertained cowboys and drifters in the dark hours when decent folk were asleep. The broken eggs were just the beginning. 2 days later, Martha discovered her clothesline cut, her clean laundry lying in the dirt. The day after that, someone left a crude drawing on her front door, a picture that made her cheeks burn with shame, even as she scrubbed it away with lye soap and shaking hands. She reported none of it to Sheriff Morgan because she knew that Constance's brother was deputy, and any complaint she made would circle back as further evidence of her paranoia or guilt. A woman alone had no voice in Redemption Springs, not when another woman had decided to destroy her. The situation came to a head on a Saturday afternoon in late August when Martha drove her wagon into town to sell the vegetables from her garden. She had spent the morning harvesting tomatoes, squash, and beans, had arranged them carefully in wooden crates, and had dressed in her best Sunday dress because she needed the money from the sales to buy flour and sugar before winter. The town square was busy with the weekend market, farmers and ranchers selling their goods, children running between the stalls, and women examining fabric and ribbons with careful eyes. Martha set up her table near the livery stable, spreading a clean cloth over the rough wood and arranging her vegetables with hands that trembled slightly because she could already feel the eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting like wind through dry grass. She sold nothing for the first hour. Women she had known since childhood walked past her table without meeting her eyes, clutching their children closer, as if virtue could be lost through proximity. Men looked at her in a new way, their gazes lingering too long, assessing her as they might assess a horse they were considering buying. Martha felt something crack inside her chest, a fracture in the foundation of who she believed herself to be, and she was gathering her things to leave when Constance Pruitt arrived with a group of women from the church committee. Constance was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the permanent crease of disapproval between her eyes. She wore black like a uniform, still mourning a husband who had abandoned her, and she moved through the market with the confidence of someone who knew her words carried weight. She stopped at Martha's table, picked up a tomato, and examined it with theatrical scrutiny. "These look passable," Constance said, her voice carrying across the square, "though I wonder if they're safe to eat, coming from a house with such traffic at all hours." Martha felt her face flush hot, then cold. "Mrs. Pruitt, I do not know what you mean." "Do you not?" Constance set the tomato down with exaggerated care. "Strange, then, that I have seen lamplight in your windows well past midnight on multiple occasions. Strange that I have heard horses on the road to your property at hours when decent women are asleep. Strange that a young woman with no family and no supervision maintains such a comfortable household without visible means of support beyond a small garden." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Martha saw the other women watching, saw the men pretending not to listen while catching every word. She knew that anything she said would be twisted, that denial would sound like guilt, that silence would be taken as admission. She was trapped in a story someone else had written, and there was no way out. That did not end with her complete ruin. "I live alone, and I harm no one," Martha said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My father left me that land, and I work it honestly. Whatever you think you have seen, you are mistaken." "Am I?" Constance smiled, and it was a terrible expression. "I saw a man leaving your property 3 nights ago just before dawn. Tall fellow on a gray horse. Do not bother denying it, girl. Half the town knows what you are, and the other half will know by Sunday." Martha felt the world tilt. There had been no man, no horse, no visitor of any kind. The lie was so brazen, so complete, that for a moment she could not find words to combat it. And in that moment of hesitation, Constance won, because the crowd took Martha's silence as confirmation. Someone behind her spat in the dirt. A woman pulled her daughter away from Martha's table as if from a leper. The butcher's wife crossed herself and muttered something about Jezebel. And Martha understood with a clarity that was like falling through ice into dark water that her life in Redemption Springs was over. No one would buy from her. No one would speak to her. And eventually someone would find a legal reason to take her land. She would be driven out with nothing, cast into a world that devoured women without protection, all because one bitter woman had decided to destroy her. She was loading her vegetables back into her wagon, blinking hard against tears she refused to shed in public, when a voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade through silk. "Mrs. Pruitt, I believe you are mistaken about what you saw." The voice was deep and calm, with a hint of gravel that spoke of whiskey and campfire smoke. Martha looked up and saw a man standing at the edge of the crowd, tall and lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle. He wore dusty trail clothes, a dark vest over a blue shirt, and a hat that shadowed his face. But even in shadow she could see strong features, a jaw dark with stubble, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over winter water. He walked forward with the easy confidence of a man who had faced down worse things than a gossiping woman in a market square. And the crowd parted for him instinctively. "Excuse me?" Constance turned to face him, her voice sharp with affront. "And who might you be to contradict what I have seen with my own eyes?" "Name is Cole Sutton," the man said, stopping a few feet from Martha's table. "I am a horse trader, recently arrived from Colorado, and I have been staying at the boarding house for the past 2 weeks while I conduct business in the area. And 3 nights ago I was riding back from a late consultation with the rancher Thomas McBride about purchasing some of his breeding stock. I passed by the Calloway property around dawn, which I admit is an unusual hour for travel, but my business required it. If you saw a man on a gray horse near Miss Calloway's property, you saw me, and I did not stop, did not speak to the lady, and certainly did not enter her home. I was simply passing on a public road, as is my right." The silence that followed was profound. Constance's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple. "You are saying I am a liar?" "I am saying you saw a man on a road and constructed a story that bears no resemblance to truth," Cole said evenly. "I am also saying that Miss Calloway here has done nothing to warrant the treatment you have subjected her to, and I am suggesting that you owe her an apology." "I owe her nothing," Constance snapped. "And if you think your word carries weight against mine in this town, you are sadly mistaken. You are a stranger here, Mr. Sutton. I have lived in Redemption Springs for 20 years. Then you have had 20 years to learn better than to destroy an innocent woman's reputation out of spite, Cole replied, and there was iron beneath the calm now. But if an apology is beyond you, perhaps silence would suffice, because I promise you, Mrs. Pruitt, if I hear another word of slander against Miss Calloway, I will make it my personal mission to investigate the source of these rumors and expose them for the malicious lies they are. And I suspect that when the truth comes out, you will find yourself far more isolated than the woman you have tried to ruin. Constance opened her mouth, closed it, and then turned on her heel and stalked away, her followers scattering like startled birds. The crowd began to disperse, people suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere, and within minutes the square had returned to its normal rhythm, as if the confrontation had been a stone thrown into water, making ripples that quickly faded. Martha stood frozen, her hands gripping the edge of her wagon. The stranger named Cole Sutton turned to her, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 30, weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting across long distances. His mouth was firm but not unkind, and there was something in his expression that made her think of her father, a quality of steadiness that suggested this was a man who meant what he said. Miss Calloway, he said, tipping his hat, I apologize for inserting myself into your business, but I could not stand by and watch that woman savage your name with lies. You do not even know me, Martha said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. Why would you defend me? Because it was the right thing to do, Cole said simply, and because I do know you in a way. I have been in Redemption Springs for 2 weeks, and in that time, I have watched you come to town, conduct yourself with dignity, and bother no one. I have also watched Mrs. Pruitt systematically poison opinion against you. I have some experience with bullies, Miss Calloway, and I have learned that they only stop when someone stands up to them. Martha felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what you have done for me. I hope I have bought you some peace, Cole said. Though I will not lie to you, Mrs. Pruitt strikes me as a persistent sort. This may not be the end of her campaign against you. I know, Martha said, and felt the weight of that knowledge settle on her shoulders. But at least now I know that not everyone in this town believes her lies. Cole studied her for a moment, and she had the strange feeling that he was seeing more than her face, that he was measuring something deeper. Are you heading back to your property now? Yes, there is no point in staying. No one will buy from me today. Then allow me to escort you, Cole said. It is the least I can do, and perhaps my presence will discourage any further mischief. Martha hesitated. She knew that riding home with a man she barely knew could fuel exactly the sort of gossip she was trying to escape. But she also knew that Cole Sutton had just made himself her ally in a very public way, and that refusing his help would be both ungracious and unwise. I would appreciate that, she said finally. Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Cole, he corrected gently. Mr. Sutton was my father, and he is long dead. They loaded the remaining vegetables into her wagon in silence, and then Cole retrieved his gray horse from the hitching post outside the boarding house and tied it to the back of her wagon. He climbed up beside her on the driver's seat, taking the reins when she offered them, and guided the wagon out of town with the easy skill of a man who had spent half his life driving teams. The road to her property was rutted and dusty, winding through scrub oak and cedar, with the sun beating down from a sky the color of faded denim. Martha sat beside Cole and tried to think of something to say, but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. He seemed content to let her have her thoughts, his attention on the road and the landscape, and she found herself stealing glances at his profile, trying to understand this stranger who had ridden to her defense without hesitation or expectation of reward. Where are you really from? She asked finally, because the silence had stretched long enough that she felt she should break it. Colorado, like I said, Cole replied. A town called Silver Creek, up in the mountains. I grew up there, learned the horse trade from my father, and made a decent living at it. But my parents both died last year, within months of each other, and the town held too many memories. So I sold the property and decided to travel for a while, trading horses and seeing country I had never seen before. Texas seemed as good a destination as any. I am sorry about your parents, Martha said softly. Thank you. I'm sorry about your father. I heard in town that you lost him recently. 6 months ago. Pneumonia took him in February. It was very fast. 1 week he was well. The next he could not breathe, and then he was gone. Martha swallowed hard against the grief that still rose without warning. He was a good man, honest and kind. He deserved better than to die so young. Good men often do, Cole said. The world is not particularly fair in that regard. They fell silent again, and Martha watched the familiar landscape roll past. She had traveled this road hundreds of times, knew every bend and every tree, but today it looked different somehow, as if Cole's presence beside her had shifted the lens through which she saw her world. She realized with a start of surprise that she felt safe for the first time in weeks, protected by this stranger's quiet strength in a way she had not felt since her father's death. When they reached her property, Cole helped her unload the vegetables, carrying the crates into her small root cellar with efficient movements. He examined her broken clothesline, her vandalized chicken coop, and the scrubbed place on her front door where the crude drawing had been, and his expression grew steadily darker. This has been going on for weeks, he said. It was not a question. Yes? Small things at first, then escalating? I think Mrs. Pruitt has been doing it herself, or hiring someone to do it for her. She wants to drive me away. Why? What have you done to her? Nothing, Martha said helplessly. I think I am simply young and alone, and she sees that as either an insult or an opportunity. I do not fully understand it myself. Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring out across her property toward the direction of Constance Pruitt's land. I have known women like her, he said finally, women who have been hurt and who handle that hurt by hurting others. It does not excuse her actions, but it might explain them. Her husband left her, I understand. Yes, 2 years ago. It was a great scandal. But that is hardly my fault. Of course not. But you represent something she has lost. Youth, possibility, independence, and so she wants to destroy you. Cole turned back to her, and his expression was serious. Miss Calloway, I want to ask you something, and I want you to consider it carefully before you answer. Martha felt her heart begin to beat faster. What is it? Would you consider marrying me? The world seemed to stop. Martha stared at him, certain she had misheard, but his face was calm and serious, and he was watching her with those steady, gray-blue eyes. I beg your pardon? I am asking if you would marry me, Cole repeated. Not for love, though I hope that might come in time, not even for companionship, though I would welcome that as well, but for protection, for a name that carries weight and a presence that will stop Mrs. Pruitt and anyone else who wants to torment you. You need a husband, Miss Calloway, not because you are weak or incapable, but because this world does not allow women to stand alone without punishing them for it. And I need a home, a place to put down roots after months of drifting. We could help each other. Martha felt dizzy, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. You do not even know me. We met less than 3 hours ago. I know enough, Cole said. I know you are brave because you have stood alone against a campaign designed to break you. I know you are honest because I have watched you conduct yourself with integrity even when it cost you business. I know you work hard because this property is well maintained despite the vandalism, and I know you deserve better than what this town has given you. That is enough for me to make this offer. Whether it is enough for you to accept is your decision. This is insane, Martha whispered, but even as she said it, she felt a strange pull toward the idea. Marriage to a stranger was mad, reckless, the sort of thing desperate women did in dime novels. But she was desperate, was she not? And Cole Sutton, for all that he was a stranger, had shown her more kindness in 3 hours than this town had shown her in 3 months. You cannot possibly want to tie yourself to a woman with a ruined reputation." "Your reputation is not ruined, it is under attack," Cole corrected. "And the fastest way to end that attack is to give you the protection of marriage. Once you are my wife, Mrs. Pruitt's rumors become slander against a married woman, which carries far more serious consequences. And my presence here as your husband and partner will make it clear that you are not alone and vulnerable. The vultures will move on to easier prey." "And what do you get from this arrangement?" Martha asked, because she could not believe anyone would make such an offer without expecting something in return. "A home," Cole said simply. "A place to build something permanent. I have been drifting for 8 months, Miss Calloway, and I am tired. I want land and work, and a reason to wake up in the morning beyond the next town and the next horse trade. Your property is good land, with water and grazing potential. Together we could make it into something substantial. And perhaps in time we could make a life together that is more than just convenience. I will not lie and say I am offering you romance, but I am offering you partnership, respect, and protection. For a woman in your position, that might be worth more than romance anyway." Martha turned away from him, walking to the edge of her porch and staring out at the land her father had carved from wilderness. She thought about the broken eggs and the cut clothesline, about Constance Pruitt's venomous smile and the way the town had turned on her like dogs scenting blood. She thought about the long winter coming, about trying to survive alone without customers for her goods, without friends or allies. And she thought about Cole Sutton's calm voice and steady eyes, about the way he had stepped between her and destruction without hesitation. "If I say yes," she said slowly, not turning around, "what would you expect from me? As a wife, I mean." There was a pause, and then Cole said carefully, "I would expect partnership in running this property. I would expect honesty and communication. I would expect you to give this marriage a genuine chance to become something real, rather than just a legal convenience. As for the more intimate aspects of marriage, I would expect nothing until you were ready to offer it. I am not a man who forces himself on women, Miss Calloway. If we marry, we will share a home and a life, but your person remains your own until you choose otherwise." The answer was so decent, so respectful, that Martha felt something loosen in her chest. She turned to face him, this stranger who was offering her salvation in the most unexpected form. "My name is Martha," she said. "If we are discussing marriage, you should call me Martha." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a warmth entering his eyes. "Martha," he repeated, and the name sounded different in his voice, gentler. "Does that mean you are considering my offer?" "I am thinking that I would be a fool to refuse it," Martha admitted. "But I'm also thinking that this is the most impulsive thing I have ever done, and I am frightened of making a terrible mistake." "That is fair," Cole said, "but consider this. If you marry me and it proves to be a mistake, you will at least be a married woman with legal protections and social standing. If you refuse and try to weather this storm alone, you will likely lose everything. I am not saying my offer is without risk, but I am saying it is less risky than the alternative." He was right, and Martha knew it. She took a deep breath, sent a silent prayer to her father's memory, and made a choice that would change everything. "Yes," she said, "I will marry you, Cole Sutton. God help us both." The smile that crossed Cole's face was like sunrise, transforming his weathered features into something approaching handsome. "Thank you," he said simply. "I promise you will not regret this." "I hope you're right," Martha said, and found herself smiling back despite her fear. "When did you want to do this?" "As soon as possible," Cole replied. "Tomorrow, if we can arrange it. The sooner we are married, the sooner Mrs. Pruitt's rumors lose their power. Is there a preacher in town who would perform the ceremony?" "Reverend Thompson. He knew my father. I think he would do it, though he may have questions." "Let him ask," Cole said. "We will tell him the truth, that we have decided to marry and want to begin our life together without delay. In frontier towns, quick courtships are common enough. He should not be too surprised." They made their plans in Martha's small kitchen, sitting across from each other at the scarred wooden table where she had eaten meals with her father. Cole would return to town and arrange for the marriage license, speak with the reverend, and settle his affairs at the boarding house. Martha would prepare the house for a husband's presence, moving her father's things out of the main bedroom and washing the linens that had sat unused since his death. They would marry the next afternoon Sunday, and Cole would move into the property immediately afterward. It was efficient and practical, and Martha tried not to think about how different this was from the wedding she had once imagined, back when she was young enough to believe in love at first sight and handsome suitors who courted with flowers and poetry. Cole left as the sun was setting, riding back toward town on his gray horse with a promise to return by noon the next day. Martha stood in her doorway and watched him go and felt the strangest mixture of terror and hope rising in her chest. In less than 24 hours, she would be a married woman, bound to a man she had met that morning. It was madness. It was survival. It was, she realized, the first decision she had made in months that felt like taking control of her life rather than simply reacting to disasters. She spent the evening cleaning with a fervor that bordered on violence, scrubbing floors and beating rugs and washing windows until the little house gleamed in the lamplight. She moved her father's clothes into the spare room, folding each shirt and vest with shaking hands and whispering apologies to his memory. She knew he would have wanted her to be happy, to be safe, and she thought he might have approved of Cole Sutton. Her father had been a practical man who valued character over sentiment, and Cole had shown more character in one afternoon than most men showed in a lifetime. Sleep would not come that night. Martha lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling and the night birds calling in the darkness. She thought about Cole's calm voice and steady hands, about the way he had faced down Constance Pruitt without raising his voice or losing his temper. She thought about his offer of partnership and respect, about his promise that her person would remain her own. And she thought, with a flutter of something that might have been anticipation, about what it would be like to not be alone anymore, to have someone to talk to in the evenings and someone to share the burden of the work. By the time dawn broke across the Texas prairie, Martha had convinced herself that she was making the right choice. She dressed in her best gown, a deep blue calico that her father had bought for her 20th birthday, and pinned her dark hair into a neat coil at the base of her neck. She had no flowers, no veil, no trousseau of fine linens and lace, but she had courage, and she had hope. And as she drove her wagon back into Redemption Springs that Sunday morning, she held tight to both. The church was already full when she arrived, families gathered for the weekly service, and Martha felt every eye turned toward her as she walked up the aisle to her usual pew. The whispers started immediately, a susurration of curiosities and judgment, but Martha kept her eyes forward and her spine straight. Let them talk. By the end of the day, they would have something real to discuss. Cole was waiting outside the church after the service, dressed in clean black trousers and a white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He looked nervous, Martha realized with some surprise, his hands fidgeting with the brim of his hat in a gesture that was oddly endearing. When he saw her, his face relaxed into a smile, and he crossed the dusty yard to meet her. "You came?" he said, and there was relief in his voice. "Did you think I would not?" "I worried you might reconsider in the cold light of morning," Cole admitted. "This is a big step, Martha. I would not have blamed you for changing your mind." "I have not changed my mind," Martha said firmly. "Have you spoken to Reverend Thompson?" "I have. He is waiting for us inside the rectory. He has the license prepared and 2 witnesses arranged. We can be married in less than an hour if you're ready." "I am ready," Martha said, and found that it was true. Whatever doubts she had were outweighed by the certainty that this was her best chance, perhaps her only chance, at salvaging her life. The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in the Reverend's small office with 2 elderly church members serving as witnesses. Reverend Thompson had known Martha's father and treated her with kindness, though his eyes held questions he was too polite to ask. He led them through the vows with gentle efficiency, and when Cole slipped a simple gold band onto Martha's finger, she felt the weight of it like an anchor, something solid to hold on to in uncertain waters. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thompson said, and Martha felt her heart stutter. Cole leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief and careful, more promise than passion, and when he pulled back his eyes were warm. "Hello, wife," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Hello, husband," Martha replied, and tasted the strangeness of the word. They signed the marriage certificate, accepted the Reverend's congratulations and blessings, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun as husband and wife. A few people were still lingering in the churchyard, and Martha saw the exact moment when they recognized Cole and realized what had just happened. Shock rippled through the small crowd like wind through wheat. Constance Pruitt was standing near the church steps, and her face went pale, then red when she saw Martha's hand tucked into the crook of Cole's arm, saw the gold band gleaming on her finger. She opened her mouth, but whatever venom she had prepared died unspoken because Cole was already moving forward, his expression pleasant, but his eyes hard as flint. "Mrs. Pruitt," Cole said politely, tipping his hat, "I wanted to let you know that Martha and I were just married. I am sure you will be among the first to congratulate us and wish us well." It was not a request. It was a challenge, delivered in a voice that made it clear there was only one acceptable response. Constance stood frozen, her face working through a complicated series of expressions, and then she managed a stiff nod. "Congratulations," she said, and the word sounded like it was choking her. "Thank you," Martha said sweetly. "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Pruitt. I do hope you will spread the happy news to all your friends." The barb landed. Constance's eyes narrowed, but she could say nothing, do nothing, without exposing herself as the spiteful creature she was. She turned and stalked away, her black skirts kicking up dust, and Martha felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. "That was well done," Cole murmured, as they walked toward her wagon. "You have a spine of steel, Mrs. Sutton." "Mrs. Sutton," Martha repeated, testing the name. "That will take some getting used to." "You have the rest of your life to practice," Cole said, and helped her up onto the wagon seat with careful courtesy. They drove back to the property in the golden afternoon light, and Martha felt the tension that had lived in her shoulders for months finally beginning to ease. She was married. She had a husband. She was no longer a vulnerable woman alone, but a wife with a partner and protector. Constance Pruitt's rumors would wither and die now, choked by the reality of Martha's respectability. The worst was over. Or so she thought, until they arrived home and found the house ransacked. The door was hanging open, the lock broken. Inside, furniture was overturned, dishes smashed, her father's books torn from their shelves and scattered across the floor. Someone had gone through every room with deliberate viciousness, destroying what they could not steal, leaving chaos and violation in their wake. Martha stood in the doorway and felt something crack inside her, all the stress and fear of the past months crystallizing into a rage so pure it burned. "This was her," she said, her voice shaking. "This was Constance Pruitt. She knew I would be in town for the wedding. She did this because she wanted to punish me one last time." Cole surveyed the damage with a face like carved stone. "Can you prove it?" "No, she is too careful for that, but I know it was her." "Then we will clean this up, secure the house, and make sure it never happens again," Cole said firmly. "And tomorrow I will pay a visit to Mrs. Pruitt and make it very clear that any further harassment of my wife will result in consequences she will not enjoy." The word wife, spoken with such fierce protectiveness, made Martha's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She looked at this man she had married just hours ago, this stranger who was already proving himself to be exactly what he had promised, and felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading through the cold fear. They spent the rest of the afternoon putting the house back together. Cole worked with quiet efficiency, righting furniture and repairing the broken door lock with tools from his saddlebag. Martha swept up broken dishes and gathered the scattered books, salvaging what she could. By the time the sun set, The house was not perfect, but it was habitable, and the violation felt less raw. "I'm sorry," Martha said as they sat down to a simple supper of bread and cheese. "This is not how I imagined spending my wedding day." "Neither did I," Cole admitted. "But we faced it together, and we survived it." "That seems like an appropriate metaphor for marriage." Martha found herself laughing, a sound that felt rusty and strange. "You have a strange sense of humor, Mr. Sutton." "I prefer to find amusement where I can," Cole said, smiling. "Life is hard enough without taking it too seriously all the time." They talked through the evening, learning about each other in the small ways that mattered. Cole told her about growing up in the mountains, about learning to read horse temperament from his father and business sense from his mother. Martha told him about her childhood in Texas, about her mother who had died when she was 12, and her father who had raised her with a combination of discipline and devotion. They discovered they both liked strong coffee and spice cake, both preferred books to cards, and both believed that honesty mattered more than charm. When the dishes were washed and the lamps dimmed, they stood awkwardly in the main room, suddenly aware that they were married people expected to share a bedroom. Cole cleared his throat. "I will sleep in the spare room," he said. "I meant what I said earlier, Martha. You have your own space until you decide otherwise." Martha felt a rush of gratitude and something else, something that might have been disappointment. "Thank you. That is very considerate." "It is only decent," Cole replied. "Good night, wife. Sleep well." "Good night, husband." Martha lay in her bed that night and listened to Cole moving around in the spare room, heard the creak of the old bed frame as he settled in. She had a husband now, a partner, a protector. But she did not yet have a marriage, not in the truest sense. And as she drifted toward sleep, she found herself wondering how long it would take for the arrangement they had made to transform into something real. The answer came sooner than she expected. Cole rose before dawn and was outside working by the time Martha emerged from her room. She found him in the barn, examining the structure and making notes on a piece of paper. He looked up when she appeared, and his smile was genuine and warm. "Good morning. I hope I did not wake you." "Not at all. I'm usually up early anyway. What are you doing?" "Making plans," Cole said, gesturing to the barn. "This structure is sound but could use some reinforcement before winter. And I was thinking we could expand the chicken coop, add some proper fencing for horses. If I'm going to continue trading, I will need space to keep stock temporarily. With your permission, of course. This is your property." "Our property," Martha corrected. "We are married now, Cole. What is mine is yours." Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure or relief or both. "Then our property. I want to build something here, Martha. Something that lasts." "So do I," Martha said, and meant it with a fierceness that surprised her. They fell into a routine over the following days. Cole threw himself into improving the property with an energy that seemed boundless, repairing fences and reinforcing structures and clearing brush. Martha tended the garden and the chickens, cooked meals and mended clothes, and found herself watching her husband with growing fascination. He was a man who worked with his whole body, who moved with grace and competence, and who treated her with a careful courtesy that never felt condescending. On the 4th day of their marriage, Cole saddled his horse and announced he was riding into town for supplies. "And to have a conversation with Mrs. Pruitt," he added, his voice casual but his eyes hard. "Be careful," Martha said. "She has a vicious tongue." "I have dealt with worse," Cole assured her. "I will be back by evening." He returned late that afternoon with a wagon full of lumber and supplies and a grim expression that told Martha the conversation had not been pleasant. Over supper, he told her what had happened. "I paid a visit to Mrs. Pruitt's property and found her outside tending her garden. I was polite but firm. I told her I knew she was behind the vandalism and the rumors, and that any further harassment of you would result in legal action. I also made it clear that I have connections throughout the territory from my years of trading, and that I would not hesitate to use those connections to ensure she faced consequences." How did she react? "Denied everything, of course, but she heard me. I saw it in her eyes. She knows I'm not a man who makes empty threats." Cole paused, choosing his words carefully. I also spoke with Sheriff Morgan, told him about the harassment and the vandalism. He was not particularly helpful, given his deputy is Mrs. Pruitt's brother, but I made sure there was an official record of my complaint. If anything else happens, we have documentation. Thank you, Martha said softly. No one has ever stood up for me the way you have. You are my wife, Cole said simply. Standing up for you is not a favor. It is my responsibility and my honor. The words settled around Martha's heart like a warm blanket. She looked across the table at her husband, this good man who had ridden into her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray, and felt the first stirrings of something deeper than gratitude. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks began to shape themselves into something like a life. Cole continued to improve the property, building a new corral and repairing the barn roof. Martha sold vegetables at the market again and found that with Cole beside her, people were willing to buy, willing to treat her with cautious respect. The rumors did not disappear entirely, but they faded to background noise, drowned out by the undeniable reality of her marriage and Cole's steady presence. They talked in the evenings, sharing stories and opinions, learning each other's rhythms. Martha discovered that Cole had a dry wit that caught her by surprise, that he could make her laugh with an observation so perfectly timed it seemed like a gift. Cole discovered that Martha was well-read and thoughtful, that she had opinions about politics and philosophy that challenged and engaged him. They played chess by lamplight, worked side by side in the garden, and slowly built a friendship that felt solid and real. But they still slept in separate rooms, and the unspoken tension of that separation began to wear on both of them. It was Martha who finally broke the pattern, 6 weeks after their wedding. She woke in the middle of the night from a nightmare about her father's death, gasping and crying. And before she could stop herself, she was stumbling out of her room and knocking on Cole's door. He answered immediately, his hair mussed from sleep, his chest bare. "Martha, what is wrong?" "I had a nightmare," she managed, feeling foolish and small. "I'm sorry for waking you." "Do not apologize," Cole said gently. He stepped back into his room and returned wearing a shirt, then guided her to the kitchen and lit a lamp. "Sit down. I will make tea." They sat together in the quiet darkness, drinking chamomile tea that tasted like comfort. Martha told him about the dream, about watching her father struggle for breath and being unable to help him. Cole listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. "Grief is not a straight line," he said quietly. "It circles back when you least expect it. I still dream about my parents sometimes, still wake up thinking I need to tell them something before I remember they are gone. It is the price of loving people. The loss never fully heals." "How do you bear it?" Martha asked, her fingers curling around his. "By remembering that the love was worth the loss," Cole said, "and by building new things to love, so that life feels full instead of empty." They sat in silence for a long moment, hands joined across the table, and Martha felt something click into place inside her chest. This man, who had married her out of pragmatism and necessity, had become someone precious to her. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, amid the ordinary work and daily conversations, she had started to fall in love with him. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She looked at Cole's face in the lamplight, at the strong lines and gentle eyes, and made another impulsive decision. "Cole," she said softly, "I do not want to sleep alone anymore." His eyes widened slightly, and she saw hope flare in them. "Are you certain?" "I am certain. You have been more than patient, more than kind, and I think we have built something real here. This marriage started as a convenience, but it has become something else. At least for me." "For me as well," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been half in love with you for weeks, Martha, but I did not want to push, did not want to make you feel obligated." "You are not pushing. I am choosing," Martha said. She stood, still holding his hand, and tugged gently. "Come to bed, husband." The smile that crossed Cole's face was like dawn breaking. He followed her to the main bedroom, And what happened there was tender and careful and entirely without regret. Cole kept his promise, letting Martha set the pace. And when they finally came together, it was with a rightness that felt inevitable. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Cole's arms around her and his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Martha felt peace settle over her like a benediction. This was where she was meant to be. This man, this marriage, this life they were building together was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty that had led her here. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you," Cole replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I think I have loved you since I watched you stand tall in that market square, refusing to let that bitter woman break you." "You saved me that day," Martha said. "No," Cole corrected gently. "I just gave you the tools to save yourself." Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of color in the trees. Cole's horse trading business flourished, with buyers coming from as far as San Antonio to examine his stock. Martha's garden produced a final harvest that sold well at market, and they began to save money for the first time in months. The property transformed under their combined efforts, becoming not just functional, but beautiful, with new fences and painted trim and flower boxes that Martha filled with petunias. Constance Pruitt left them alone. Occasionally, Martha would see her in town, would feel the weight of her bitter gaze, but no more vandalism occurred and no new rumors surfaced. Cole had made his point, and Constance had apparently decided to direct her venom elsewhere. Martha found she could pity the older woman now, could see the loneliness and pain that drove her cruelty. It did not excuse what Constance had done, but it made her less frightening, reduced her from monster to merely a sad, damaged person. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Martha realized she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way she had not been since her mother's death. She leaned against Cole's shoulder and felt his arm come around her automatically, as natural as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. "How strange life is," Martha said. "6 months ago, I was alone and terrified, certain I would lose everything. Now I am married to a wonderful man and we are building something real together. If you had told me this would happen, I would never have believed you." "I am glad you took a chance on me," Cole said. "I know it was not an easy decision." "It was the best decision I ever made," Martha replied. She turned to face him, seeing the love in his eyes that still made her heart skip. "You gave me back my life, Cole. You gave me hope when I had none. I will spend the rest of my days being grateful for that." "You gave me something too," Cole said softly. "A home, a purpose, someone to love who loves me back. We saved each other, Martha. That is what partners do." Winter came gentle that year, with light snows and cold that never quite reached bone deep. They spent the short days working side by side and the long nights curled together by the fire, reading aloud or playing cards or simply talking. Martha learned every story Cole had to tell, every scar on his body, and every dream in his heart. Cole learned Martha's tells, the way her voice changed when she was worried, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking hard about something. They grew into each other like trees with intertwined roots, separate but inseparable. In January, Martha realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but the confirmation from the doctor in town made it real in a way that stole her breath. She told Cole that night after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "A baby," Cole repeated, and his voice was full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you pleased?" Martha asked, suddenly uncertain. "Pleased?" Cole laughed and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen until she was dizzy and laughing too. "I am overjoyed, terrified, but overjoyed. You are going to be a mother, Martha. We are going to be a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the cold months. Cole became fiercely protective, insisting Martha rest more and work less. hovering over her with an attention that was endearing even when it was annoying. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Martha sewed tiny clothes with shaking hands, hardly able to believe that soon there would be a child to wear them. Spring arrived with wildflowers and warm breezes, and on a sunny morning in late April, Martha went into labor. The midwife from town came to attend her, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, who had delivered half the babies in Redemption Springs. Cole paced the main room like a caged animal, flinching every time Martha cried out, until Mrs. Henderson finally took pity on him and led him into the bedroom to hold his wife's hand. "You are doing so well," Cole murmured, wiping sweat from Martha's forehead with a cool cloth. "You are the bravest person I know." "I am fairly certain I am dying," Martha gasped between contractions. "You are not dying. You are bringing our child into the world just a little longer, my love." And then with a final push and a cry that seemed to shake the rafters, their son was born. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a surprising amount of dark hair and lungs that worked magnificently. Cole cut the cord with shaking hands while Martha wept with relief and exhaustion. And when the midwife placed the baby in Martha's arms, the world seemed to narrow to just the three of them, a family complete. "What should we name him?" Martha asked, tracing the baby's tiny features with one finger. "I was thinking Thomas," Cole said softly, "after your father, if that is acceptable to you." Martha felt tears spill over again, but these were tears of joy. Thomas Sutton. Yes, that is perfect. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, and both Martha and Cole fell completely in love with him. Cole proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle, spending hours rocking the baby or singing off-key lullabies that made Martha smile. The property continued to thrive, with Cole hiring a young man from town to help with the heavy work so he could spend more time with his family. 1 year became 2, then 3. Thomas grew from infant to toddler, learning to walk and talk, filling the house with noise and laughter. The horse trading business expanded until Cole had to build a second barn to accommodate the stock. Martha planted an orchard, apple and peach trees that would take years to bear fruit but represented hope for the future. They saved money, bought more land, and became established members of the Redemption Springs community. Constance Pruitt eventually moved away, going to live with a sister in Houston, and Martha felt only relief at her departure. The rumors that had once threatened to destroy her life were long forgotten, replaced by a reputation for hard work and integrity. People came to the Sutton property to buy horses or fresh produce, and they left with respect for the couple who had built something real from nothing. On a warm evening in June, 5 years after that fateful day in the market square, Martha and Cole sat on their porch and watched Thomas play in the yard, chasing fireflies with the single-minded determination of a child. Martha was pregnant again, just beginning to show, and Cole's hand rested gently on her belly as they talked about names and futures. "Do you ever regret it?" Martha asked, "marrying me that day, taking on all my problems and tying yourself to a woman you barely knew?" Cole was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "Not for 1 second," he said finally. "That day I married you was the day my real life began. Everything before was just waiting." "I feel the same," Martha said softly. She laced her fingers through his and watched their son laugh in the gathering dusk. "You saved me, Cole. From loneliness and despair and a life of running, you gave me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would find." "We saved each other," Cole corrected, pulling her close. "That is what love does. It makes us braver and stronger and more ourselves than we could ever be alone." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky and Thomas's laughter rang out across the prairie, Martha knew he was right. Their marriage had started as convenience, as protection against the cruelty of the world, but it had become something far more precious, a partnership built on trust and respect and deep, abiding love. They had faced down gossip and hardship and uncertainty, and they had emerged not just surviving but thriving. The daughter they welcomed that November was a tiny, perfect thing with Cole's gray-blue eyes and Martha's dark hair. They named her Carolyn, and she completed their family in ways none of them had anticipated. Thomas adored his baby sister, appointed himself her fierce protector, and Cole and Martha watched their children grow with hearts so full they sometimes ached. The years continued to unfold with the ordinary magic of a life well lived. There were hard seasons and easy ones, years when the rains came and years of drought, but Martha and Cole weathered them all together. They added rooms to the house as the children grew, expanded the orchards, and became one of the most successful horse trading operations in the region. Cole's reputation for honest dealing and quality stock spread far beyond Redemption Springs, and buyers came from across Texas to do business with him. Martha became known for her healing skills, learning herbalism from an old woman in town and tending to neighbors who fell sick or injured. She found satisfaction in the work, in being able to ease suffering and bring comfort, and Cole supported her fully, watching the children when she had to ride out to help someone in need. Thomas grew into a tall, serious boy who loved horses as much as his father did, who could gentle a skittish colt with patience and soft words. Caroline was bright and curious, always asking questions, always reading every book she could get her hands on. They were good children, kind children, and Martha and Cole raised them with the same values they lived by themselves: honesty, hard work, compassion, and courage. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Martha into town and bought her a proper wedding ring, gold set with a small sapphire that matched his eyes. It was an extravagance they could finally afford, and Martha wore it with pride, but she never took off the simple gold band he had given her that first day. That ring represented everything they had built together, all the struggles and triumphs that had forged them into partners. They stood in the jeweler's shop, Cole fastening the new ring beside the old one, and Martha looked at the reflection of the two of them in the mirror. They had changed in 10 years, weathered by work and time, with lines at the corners of their eyes and silver starting to thread through their hair. But they were still themselves, still the people who had taken a leap of faith on a hot August day and built a love story from necessity and hope. "Happy anniversary, wife," Cole murmured, kissing her temple. "Happy anniversary, husband," Martha replied, turning to embrace him. "Thank you for the best 10 years of my life." "Here is to 40 more," Cole said, and Martha knew he meant every word. The children grew and eventually left to make their own ways in the world. Thomas took over the horse trading business, expanding it further with new breeding programs and innovative training methods. Caroline became a teacher, opening a small school in Redemption Springs that educated children regardless of their family's ability to pay. Martha and Cole watched their children succeed and felt the deep satisfaction of knowing they had raised them well. As they moved into their later years, Martha and Cole settled into a comfortable rhythm. They worked less and rested more, spent long afternoons on the porch remembering stories and watching the sun set over land they had made productive and beautiful. Cole's hair went fully silver, and Martha's dark hair faded to gray, but their love remained constant, a steady flame that had burned for decades without ever diminishing. They celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by family, Thomas and his wife, and their 3 children, Caroline and her husband and their 2 daughters. The house was full of noise and laughter, full of life, and Martha stood in her kitchen making coffee and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was the family she had built, the legacy she would leave. These children and grandchildren who bore her name, who carried forward the values she and Cole had instilled. Cole found her there and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," Martha said simply. "How one terrible situation led to the greatest blessing of my life." "I am the lucky one," Cole replied. "I was drifting, lost, going through the motions, and then I saw a brave woman standing alone in a market square, and I knew I had found my purpose." They stood together in the kitchen, surrounded by the sounds of their family, and Martha thought about that day so long ago. The broken eggs and cruel rumors, the fear and desperation, the impulsive decision to marry a stranger. All of it had led to this moment, to this life, to this overwhelming sense of rightness. "I love you," she said, as she had said thousands of times over the years. "I love you too," Cole replied, as he always did, today and always. The years continued their inevitable march. Cole's health began to fail gradually, his strong body finally showing the wear of decades of hard work. Martha tended him with the same skill she had used to help so many others, but there were some things even love and herbalism could not fix. On a quiet morning in early spring, with Martha holding his hand and sunlight streaming through the window, Cole Sutton took his last breath and left the world as peacefully as he had lived in it. Martha grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had learned strength from her husband, had been shaped by their years together into someone who could bear loss without being destroyed by it. She lived another 10 years after Cole's death, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren be born, tending the property they had built together, and keeping his memory alive through stories and love. When her own time came, on a warm evening in June with the smell of flowers drifting through the window, Martha Sutton died in the same bed where she had borne her children and loved her husband. Her last thoughts were of Cole, of the day he had stepped between her and ruin with nothing but courage and kindness. She had lived a good life, a full life, rich with love and purpose and family. They buried her next to Cole in the small cemetery outside Redemption Springs under a spreading oak tree with a simple stone that bore both their names. Their children and grandchildren gathered to remember them, to tell stories about the couple who had built something lasting from a desperate moment and an act of faith. The horse trading business continued through the generations, and the property remained in the family, a testament to what two people could build when they chose courage over fear and partnership over pride. And in Redemption Springs, the story of Martha and Cole Sutton became legend. Not the false stories that Constance Pruitt had tried to spread, but the true one. The story of how a cowboy married a woman whose reputation was under attack, how he silenced every wagging tongue in town through the simple act of standing beside her, and how that marriage of convenience transformed into a love story that lasted a lifetime. It was a story parents told their daughters about choosing character over charm, a story grandmothers told about taking chances on good people. It was a story that reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest love stories are not the ones that start with passion and romance, but the ones that start with choice and commitment, with two people deciding to build something real together. The property still stands today, transformed over generations, but recognizable, with the orchards Martha planted and the barns Cole built still standing strong. And if you visit on a quiet evening, some say you can still feel their presence there, in the gentle wind through the trees and the contentment that settles over the land like a blessing. Because true love, the kind that is built on partnership and respect and choosing each other every day, does not end with death. It becomes part of the land, part of the legacy, part of the story that continues long after the people are gone. Martha and Cole Sutton loved each other well, raised their family with wisdom and care, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, that is all any of us can hope to do. Their story began with rumor and fear, with a desperate woman and a compassionate stranger, but it became a testament to the power of decency, the strength of partnership, and the enduring nature of love freely given and gratefully received. They proved that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are not the dramatic gestures, but the quiet choices to stand beside someone when the world would have you walk away, to offer protection when you could turn your back, to build something lasting when it would be easier to keep drifting. And every year, on the anniversary of that day in the market square when Cole Sutton first defended Martha Calloway, their descendants gather at the property to remember. They tell the story again, making sure it is never forgotten, making sure the next generation understands where they came from and what values they carry forward. They talk about honor and kindness, about the importance of standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, about choosing love even when it is difficult or uncertain. The legacy of Martha and Cole Sutton is not just in the successful business or the thriving property or the children and grandchildren who carry their names. It is in the reminder that one act of decency can change everything, that one person's courage can save another person's life, and that love built on respect and partnership will always outlast love built on passion alone. They started as strangers who made a practical arrangement, but they became partners who transformed each other's lives. And in the end, they left behind a story worth telling, a life worth living, and a love worth remembering. And so the story ends as all good stories should, with love triumphant, with family gathered, with a life well lived, and a legacy worth leaving. Martha and Cole Sutton found each other in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. They faced down cruelty with courage, met gossip with grace, and proved that sometimes the most improbable beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Their story is a reminder that we are all capable of saving each other if we are brave enough to try, and that the greatest love stories are not found in grand gestures or romantic declarations, but in the daily choice to stand beside someone through everything life brings. That is the story of how a cowboy married a woman whose virtue was being destroyed by rumors, how he silenced every tongue in town through the power of his conviction and presence, and how their marriage became a love story that echoed through generations. It is a true story in the most important sense, not because it happened exactly this way to these exact people, but because it represents truths that are eternal, that courage matters, that kindness can change lives, that love is a choice we make every day, and that the people who stand beside us in our darkest moments are the ones who help us become who we were always meant to be. And in that small cemetery outside Redemption Springs, under the spreading oak tree, Martha and Cole Sutton rest side by side, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. The wind whispers through the branches, carrying echoes of laughter and love, of hard work and happy endings of two people who took a chance on each other and built something that lasted forever. That is the power of love, the gift of partnership, and the promise that even in our darkest moments there is always hope for redemption, for connection, for a future better than the past. This is their story. This is how it ended, and this is why it matters.